It was upon a dreary Tuesday in November that the singular affair of the Bogus laundry first came to my attention. A dense yellow fog, thick as mustard and tasting of soot, had descended upon London, pressing its grimy face against our window panes at 221B Baker Street. It was a true London particular, a choking miasma that transformed the familiar city into a submarine world of blurred shapes and muffled sounds. The gas lamps in the street below had been lit since noon, appearing as hazy, spectral blots in the swirling vapour, each surrounded by a faint, sickly halo. Within our sitting room, the fire crackled with a cheer that the weather could not entirely extinguish, its light glinting upon the brass of Holmes's chemical apparatus and the needle of the hypodermic syringe that lay, to my constant vexation, upon the mantelpiece. For 2 days, my friend had been in one of his blackest moods, a state of intellectual hibernation that was more unnerving than any of his manic bursts of energy. He paced the floor with the caged restlessness of a panther, his tall, gaunt frame casting a restless shadow that seemed to writhe and leap upon the walls. The criminal classes of London had entered a period of inexplicable torpor, and the absence of a worthy problem had left his formidable intellect to prey upon itself, a razor-sharp blade with nothing to cut. He had exhausted the morning papers, casting them aside with a snort of derision, and declaring the entire press a compendium of imbecilities designed for the feeble-minded. Since then he had been scraping mournfully upon his violin, producing a sequence of chords so melancholy and discordant that they seemed to be the very voice of the fog outside, a dirge for a city bereft of intrigue. "Watson, you are a man of medicine," he said suddenly, laying the instrument aside with a clatter that set my teeth on edge. "Your trade is the preservation of the body. What is your professional opinion on the long-term effects of absolute monotony upon a superior mind? Consider me a case study." "In my experience, Holmes," I replied, looking up from my well-worn copy of surgical pathology, "even a superior mind benefits from a period of rest. The brain, like any organ, requires time to recuperate. Fallow ground yields a richer harvest." "Rest! The dullest word in the language," he scoffed, his eyes flashing with a feverish light. "Rest is for the body, not the intellect. My mind is an engine, Watson, an engine built for speed and power. At this moment it is racing out of control, its gears grinding, its pistons firing to no purpose. It will shake itself to pieces if it is not soon connected to the work for which it was built. If a worthy scoundrel does not soon present himself, a cunning forger, a bold jewel thief, a murderer of true originality, I shall be forced to seek stimulation in less salutary pursuits." He gestured with his long, thin finger towards the syringe, a silent and dreadful promise. Before I could formulate a reply, one that would no doubt mix medical reason with heartfelt concern, there came a timid rap upon our door, followed by the entrance of our long-suffering landlady, Mrs. Hudson, bearing a calling card upon a silver tray. She hovered at the threshold, a study in maternal anxiety. "A gentleman to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced, her voice hushed. "He seems most dreadfully agitated. He quite startled me on the stairs, peering into the shadows as if he expected a footpad at any moment." Holmes snatched the card from the tray, his lethargy vanishing as if by magic. "Mr. Alistair Finch," he read aloud, his eyes brightening at once. "Of the Admiralty, if I'm not mistaken. That name is familiar to me from the Abernethy case, a minor figure, but noted for his meticulousness." "Show him in, Mrs. Hudson. At once. The game, Watson, may be afoot." The man who entered our chambers was a picture of professional distress. He was of middle height, with a receding hairline that suggested long hours spent hunched over a desk, and a pair of spectacles perched upon a nose that twitched with anxiety like the whiskers of a frightened mouse. He clutched a bowler hat in his hands, turning its brim over and over with such nervous energy that I feared he might tear it in two. His eyes, magnified by the thick lenses, darted about the room, taking in every detail with a fearful intensity. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" he stammered, his gaze darting from my friend to myself and back again. "I am he, and this is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, in whom you may confide as you would in myself," Holmes said, his voice now calm and reassuring. He waved him towards the armchair. "Pray be seated, Mr. Finch. You appear to be labouring under some great strain. A man in your position, with access to sensitive naval documents, cannot afford to have his nerves so frayed. It speaks of a recent and profound shock, one which has shaken your ordered world to its very foundations." Mr. Finch dropped into the chair as if his legs had been cut from under him, his jaw agape. "Good heavens, sir, how could you possibly know of my work? My position is not of such seniority as to be public knowledge." "The card says nothing," Holmes chuckled, "but the evidence is written upon your person. The calluses on your right forefinger and thumb are those of a man who spends his days wielding a pen, not a sword. The slight indentation upon the bridge of your nose suggests long hours of reading in imperfect light, a common affliction in government service. The particular cut of your coat, sober and well-made, but lacking in fashionable flair, is favoured by those in such circles. As for the Admiralty, there is a small distinctive fleck of blue ink upon your cuff, the very same shade used exclusively for the annotation of tide charts and shipping rosters. It is a trifle, but life is infinitely stranger than anything which the mind of man could invent. Now, tell me, what has brought you to Baker Street on such a miserable day?" Our visitor swallowed hard, visibly composing himself under Holmes's steady gaze. He leaned forward, his voice sinking to a conspiratorial whisper. "Mr. Holmes, I fear I am either losing my mind or I am the victim of a most bizarre and intricate plot. It concerns my laundry." I must confess that I felt a distinct pang of disappointment. After Holmes's dramatic deductions, a domestic squabble over missing shirts seemed a painfully mundane conclusion. I saw a flicker of the same sentiment in Holmes's eyes, a momentary dimming of the bright flame, but it was instantly suppressed, replaced by a look of intense, almost predatory concentration. "Pray continue," he said. "There are no details too trivial. The grandest schemes often hang upon the smallest of threads." "For the past 5 years," Mr. Finch began, "I have sent my linen to a small, respectable establishment in Lambeth, run by 2 elderly sisters. 2 weeks ago, however, a new firm opened its doors much closer to my lodgings in Kennington, the Peerless Steam Laundry Company they call themselves. Their advertisements were everywhere, promising unparalleled service. Their rates were considerably lower, and they promised a 24-hour turnaround. Against my better judgment, and swayed by the convenience, I decided to give them my custom." "And you were displeased with the results?" "On the contrary, the work was impeccable. My shirts have never been so brilliantly white, my collars so stiffly starched. It is not the quality of the work that troubles me, Mr. Holmes. It is everything else. The men who collect the baskets are not laundresses, but hulking, silent fellows with the look of dockhands or prize-fighters. They never speak a word, merely grunt and nod. The cart they use is a heavy enclosed wagon, quite unsuitable for the purpose, and its wheels make a curious grinding noise, as if carrying a great weight. And most peculiar of all, when I passed the establishment last Thursday evening, I saw no steam venting from the roof, nor did I smell any of the familiar scents of soap and bleach. The building was dark, save for a single shuttered window at the rear, from which a thin sliver of orange light escaped, pulsing faintly like a firefly. Holmes steepled his fingers, his expression now one of keen interest. "This is most singular. You have observed a laundry that does not launder, staffed by men who do not speak, using a cart built for heavy haulage. What else?" "There is more, sir. This past week I have been consumed by a project at the Admiralty, a consolidation of schedules for the refitting of our destroyers in the Portsmouth docks. It is not top-secret material, you understand, merely logistical data, but it is confidential nonetheless. The master copy was kept in a locked drawer in my desk. Yesterday morning it was gone. Was there any sign of forced entry to your office or the drawer? Scratches on the lock? Splintered wood?" "None whatsoever, and I am the only one with a key. I have been racking my brains, Mr. Holmes. I have not left my office unlocked for a single instant. I am a man of routine. The document has simply vanished into thin air. I reported it to my superior, of course, and he was displeased. He spoke of negligence. My career, my reputation is in jeopardy. I cannot explain its disappearance." "Perhaps you need not," said Holmes, leaning back in his chair, his eyes half closed. "Tell me, Mr. Finch, when your laundry is returned to you, is there any identifying mark upon it?" "Yes, a small stamp on the inside of the collar, a letter P for peerless, enclosed within a circle. It is very neat." "And you have a sample of this work with you, I trust?" "As a matter of fact, I do," said our client, his brow furrowed in confusion. He gestured to his own neck. "I am wearing one of the shirts now." "Excellent," Holmes declared, springing to his feet with a renewed vigour that I had not seen in days. The panther was uncaged. "Watson, the game is afoot. Mr. Finch, your problem, I believe, will prove to be of greater importance than the mere misplacement of a naval schedule. The fate of nations may turn on a laundry bill. I shall require you to leave this shirt with me. Go home, sir, and mention this visit to no one. Do not be alarmed if you feel you are being watched. In fact, encourage it. Walk a little slower, glance over your shoulder. We must convince our quarry that you are a nervous and timid sheep, not a wolf in disguise. I will be in touch within 48 hours. With a mixture of bewilderment and relief, our client departed, leaving his starched shirt upon our table. The fog outside seemed to have lifted slightly, or perhaps it was merely the return of purpose to our chambers that made the world seem brighter. "Well, Watson, what do you make of it?" Holmes asked, already shedding his dressing gown for a travelling coat. "A strange tale indeed," I admitted. "It seems this peerless laundry is a front for a gang of thieves. They must have found a way to take a wax impression of his office key, perhaps from a coat pocket left with his laundry, and have purloined his document." Holmes gave a thin smile. "A plausible, if uninspired, conjecture, my dear fellow. It has the solid, dependable quality of a piece of British furniture. But it is wrong. You are looking, but you're not observing. Had they stolen his key, why take only one document? Why not the entire contents of his desk? And why establish such an elaborate and suspicious enterprise for a single act of burglary? No, the solution is more subtle. The key to this mystery does not lie in what was stolen from Mr. Finch, but in what was returned to him. He picked up the shirt and carried it over to the window, examining the collar intently through his pocket lens. "Come, Watson," he said, his voice humming with excitement. "There is no time to waste. Our first stop is Kennington. I have a sudden and profound interest in the business of steam laundries." Our hansom cab deposited us in a drab street not far from the Oval. The Peerless Steam Laundry Company occupied a 2-story brick building on a corner, its windows painted over with peeling white paint. A large sign, proclaiming its name in bold black letters, was the only clean thing about the place. As Mr. Finch had reported, there was no sign of life. No steam issued from the chimney, no warm, soapy smell perfumed the air. It stood silent and inert. "Observe, Watson," Holmes murmured, pointing with his cane. "The cobblestones in front of the main entrance are pristine. A genuine laundry, with its constant traffic of heavy wet baskets and dripping carts, would show signs of wear and damp, perhaps even a faint bleaching of the stone. This place has seen no such activity. Also, note the drain pipe. It is bone dry and filled with cobwebs. A steam laundry uses a prodigious amount of water." We took up a position in the doorway of a closed tobacconist across the street. For nearly an hour we watched, the damp cold seeping into our bones. The street was quiet, save for the occasional tradesman's cart rumbling by. At last our patience was rewarded. A heavy black-painted wagon, drawn by a single powerful-looking dray horse of the Percheron breed, turned the corner and backed up to the laundry's side door. 2 burly men, the very picture of the ruffians Mr. Finch had described, jumped down from the driver's seat. They moved with a swift, practiced efficiency, unloading several large wicker laundry baskets and carrying them inside. "Note the ease with which they carry them," Holmes whispered, his eyes gleaming. "Those baskets are empty. They are delivering, not collecting." Minutes later, the men emerged, this time carrying identical baskets, which they loaded into the wagon. These they handled with considerably more effort, straining under the weight and placing them carefully, not tossing them as one might with linen. "And those are clearly laden," I observed. "Indeed, but with what? Starch shirts do not weigh so much. The wagon, too, is instructive. See the reinforced axles, the thick, solid wheels. That vehicle is designed to carry something far heavier than linen, something dense like metal or perhaps paper in great quantities." The wagon pulled away, and Holmes immediately hailed a passing cab. "Follow that wagon," he commanded the driver, "but keep 2 streets distance. We must not be seen." Our pursuit led us on a winding and illogical course through the labyrinthine streets of South London. The wagon did not follow a route that suggested residential deliveries. Instead, it made 3 stops, each time in a shabby back alley behind a row of respectable-looking houses. At each stop, one of the men would dismount, carry a basket to a back door, and return with another. The entire exchange conducted in silence. "They are making exchanges, Watson, not deliveries," Holmes noted, jotting down the addresses in his notebook. "A clerk in the War Office lives there, a secretary to a member of Parliament there, and that last one, unless I'm much mistaken, is the residence of a draftsman from the Royal Arsenal. An interesting clientele for a laundry." The final stop was the most revealing. The wagon rumbled into the mews behind a grand embassy in Belgravia, disappearing through a large set of gates that were quickly closed behind it. "The German embassy," Holmes said, a grim satisfaction in his tone. "I suspected as much. The international situation is tense, and the Kaiser is hungry for every advantage. The picture is now almost complete. Our bogus laundry is a clearinghouse, Watson, a dead drop for a highly sophisticated ring of spies. Good heavens, Holmes, but what are they smuggling in the baskets? Information, he replied, tapping his temple. The most valuable commodity in the world. They're not stealing grand naval plans in a single daring raid. That is the stuff of cheap novels. Their method is far more subtle and far more dangerous. They are targeting dozens of mid-level functionaries like our Mr. Finch, men with access to documents that in isolation seem trivial. The refitting schedule? Precisely. Add to that a report on ammunition stocks from the Arsenal draftsman, a note on troop movements from the War Office clerk, and a transcript of a parliamentary debate from the secretary. And what do you have? You have a complete picture of British military readiness, assembled piece by piece like a mosaic. The document was not stolen from Mr. Finch's desk, Watson. The information was copied from it. But how, Holmes? How? That is what we shall discover back at Baker Street. The answer, I am certain, lies in this excellent shirt. Upon our return, Holmes wasted no time. He cleared a space amidst the clutter of his chemical table, donned a pair of spectacles, and laid the shirt collar flat under the bright glare of his oil lamp. From a rack of bottles, he selected a small phial containing a clear liquid, which he handled with the delicacy of a surgeon. "Starch, Watson," he lectured as he carefully applied the liquid to the collar with a fine brush, "is a magnificent medium. It is absorbent, stiff, and, to the naked eye, entirely innocuous. But a particular form of rice starch, when treated with an iodine solution, can be made to reveal what it conceals. It is a variant of a test I devised some years ago." As he spoke, a miraculous transformation occurred before my eyes. Faint, brownish-yellow lines began to appear on the pristine white fabric, resolving themselves into tiny, precise German script. It was as if a ghost were writing a message upon the collar. "Incredible," I breathed. "Perfectly simple chemistry," he said, though he was clearly pleased with the dramatic effect. "The process is twofold. Our spies provide their agents, like Finch, with specially treated writing paper and invisible ink. The agent copies the document. He then places the paper in his laundry basket. At the bogus laundry, the paper is collected, and a new message is sent back to the agent on the starched collar of his shirt, instructions, payments, or queries. The information they have gathered is then consolidated and passed on, concealed in the false bottoms of those weighted baskets, to the embassy itself. It is a brilliant, silent, and terrifyingly efficient machine." "So Mr. Finch is a traitor," I exclaimed, my blood running cold. "I think not," Holmes said thoughtfully, peering at the script through his lens. "This message reads, 'Schedule data received. Excellent work. Payment increased. Await instructions for War Office cipher keys.' Mr. Finch struck me as a weak and nervous man, but not a wicked one. He is a pawn, Watson, an unwitting one. He has no knowledge of the invisible ink. He is merely using the laundry service he believes to be genuine. The spies are somehow copying the documents while they are in his possession. But how is that possible if he never leaves his office unlocked?" "That," Holmes said, a dangerous glint in his eye, "is the final piece of the puzzle. And to find it, I must pay a visit to the Peerless Steam Laundry Company in person. Watson, I shall require my most convincing seafaring disguise and a large quantity of shag tobacco. This is delicate work, and I must not be disturbed until morning." The next day dawned as grey and oppressive as the one before. I spent an anxious morning my thoughts constantly returning to Holmes, alone and surrounded by what was clearly a nest of dangerous foreign agents. He had forbidden me from accompanying him, insisting that my honest face was incapable of the duplicity required for such an undercover operation. It was nearly 3 in the afternoon when he finally returned. He was utterly transformed. Dressed in the rough tweed and heavy boots of a common sailor, with a clay pipe clenched in his teeth, and a faint aroma of rum about him, he looked as if he had just stepped off a freighter at the docks. His face was smudged with grime, and he had adopted a slouching, bow-legged gait. "My apologies for the delay, Watson," he said, his voice a rough imitation of a Cockney accent that was utterly convincing. The conversation was so engaging I was reluctant to leave. He threw a small, curious object onto the table. It was a flat, black tin, no larger than a snuff-box with a tiny glass lens, no bigger than a pinhead, set in one side. "What on earth is this, Holmes?" "That, my dear fellow, is the key to the entire affair. It is a marvel of German engineering, a miniature photographic camera. Our spies are more advanced than I had credited." He proceeded to recount his adventure. In his guise as a down-at-heel sailor looking for work, he had gained entry to the laundry. Feigning drunkenness, he had been permitted to sleep off his stupor in a corner, while his ears and eyes had missed nothing. The laundry was, as he suspected, merely a collection point. The real work took place in a lead-lined room in the cellar, to prevent any prying eyes from using the new Röntgen rays to see within. He had observed the washmaster, a portly, meticulous German, developing the tiny negatives in a series of chemical baths under a red lamp. "And the camera?" I asked. "Ah, the camera is the masterstroke. It is delivered to the agent, our unwitting Mr. Finch, concealed in the wicker of his laundry basket. A set of instructions, again in invisible ink on a collar, tells him how to use it. It is simplicity itself. He is told it is a new type of document weight, sent as a gift from the company. He places it on the document in question. A single press of a button on the side, disguised as a decorative stud, activates the shutter. The lens is so small it is almost unnoticeable. At night, in the privacy of his own office, he photographs the documents he works on during the day, believing he is simply tidying his desk. He then places the document weight back in the basket with his soiled linen. The spies have their information, and Mr. Finch is none the wiser. He is the perfect agent, one who does not even know he is committing treason. It is diabolical, Holmes. "It is genius, Watson, and we must meet it with genius of our own. The head of this particular snake is a man they call the washmaster, and he operates from the laundry itself. But the brain is a certain Baron von Stumpf, a military attaché at the embassy. We must catch them both. I have already sent a wire to Inspector Lestrade." A look of disdain crossed Holmes's face. "I have, of course, told him only what is necessary. He is to assemble a force at the corner of the street at 9 o'clock this evening and await my signal. I have baited a trap, Watson, and tonight we shall spring it." That evening, as the clock on the mantelpiece struck 8, Holmes began his preparations. He had procured another of Mr. Finch's shirts, and using his own chemical concoctions, had written a message on the collar in a perfect imitation of the German script. "What does it say?" I asked. "Have secured plans for new naval torpedo. Highest priority. Am being watched. Must exchange immediately. Usual place. Midnight," he translated with a grim smile. The bait is a prototype of a weapon so powerful it could alter the balance of naval power. If the Baron is as eager as I believe him to be, he will not be able to resist. He will come himself to oversee the collection of such a prize. At the appointed hour, we made our way to Kennington. The fog had thinned, and a pale, watery moon cast long skeletal shadows down the empty street. We concealed ourselves in the same dark doorway as before, while Lestrade and a dozen of his best men from Scotland Yard huddled in an alleyway further down. The laundry was dark and silent, a sleeping beast. The hours crawled by. The cold was biting, and I found myself shivering, as much from anticipation as from the damp. Holmes, however, was a statue of perfect patience, his sharp features illuminated now and then by the glow of a passing carriage lamp. Just as the distant chime of Big Ben struck midnight, we heard the sound of hoofbeats. It was not the heavy clatter of the dray horse, but the brisk, refined trot of a thoroughbred. A smart, private brougham, its lamps extinguished, pulled up before the laundry. A tall man in a heavy fur-collared coat descended. Even in the gloom, he carried himself with an unmistakable air of aristocratic authority and impatience. The side door of the laundry opened a crack, emitting a sliver of light, and the man slipped inside. "That is our Baron," Holmes whispered, his voice taut with excitement. "And now for the washmaster." He drew a small silver whistle from his pocket and blew a single, piercing note. Instantly, the night erupted into chaos. Police whistles shrilled from the alley as Lestrade and his men charged forward, their heavy boots pounding on the cobblestones like a drum roll. Lights flared inside the laundry. A window on the upper floor was thrown open, and one of the burly henchmen began to climb out, only to be hauled back by a waiting constable who had scaled the wall with surprising agility. The front door burst open with the crack of splintering wood, and Lestrade, his face flushed with triumph, appeared, dragging a stout, balding man in shirt-sleeves who sputtered in protest. Moments later, the Baron emerged, his face a mask of cold fury. A detective's hand clamped firmly on his arm. His aristocratic composure had shattered, replaced by sheer, impotent rage. "A fine night's work, Mr. Holmes," Lestrade boomed, attempting to take all the credit. "We've caught them red-handed, just as you said." "You have the foot soldiers, Inspector," Holmes replied coolly. "But the true prize is the information. See to it that every basket, every scrap of paper is seized. The cellar, in particular, will repay your attention. You will find enough evidence there to keep the Foreign Office busy for a month." As the police swarmed the building and our disgruntled prisoners were led away to be bundled into a waiting Black Maria, Holmes turned to me. "And that, Watson, concludes the affair of the bogus laundry. A most instructive little problem." Back in the warmth of our Baker Street rooms, with a fire blazing and a glass of claret in hand, Holmes gave me his final summation. "The Baron, of course, will claim diplomatic immunity and be quietly sent back to Berlin," he mused, filling his pipe. "But his network is shattered. We have the names and addresses of every one of his unwitting agents from the notebooks in the cellar. Mr. Finch's career will be saved, though he will be watched for the rest of his days. It was the sheer audacity of the scheme that almost guaranteed its success. Who would ever suspect their laundry of being the hub of an international espionage ring? It preys upon the mundane, the routine, the very things people cease to notice. It was your attention to the smallest of details that brought them down, Holmes," I said admiringly. "The lack of steam, the weight of the baskets." "And the starch, Watson," he finished, enveloping himself in a cloud of blue smoke. Never underestimate the importance of a well-starched collar. It can, as we have seen, carry secrets of state, a most capital lesson. The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes. And now, my dear fellow, unless I'm much mistaken, that is the sound of Mrs. Hudson with some coffee and toast. For the first time in 3 days, I find I have an appetite.